Hey everybody, Antipeter1M here and welcome to my channel. I have certain labels placed upon me and I place them upon myself sometimes. Labels such as human, animal, vegan, antinatalist, intellectual, minimalist, Asian, Australian, and virgin, incel, all these labels. So I'm going to discuss as many of them as I can and let you think about how much these labels really should apply to me. So the most obvious is calling me a human. Yeah. But this is actually factually very misleading. Because whilst I am a human, when we use the term human rights, we usually mean that rights that are exclusive to humans, which is very misleading. Humans deserve rights, to be sure, but humans deserve almost exactly the same rights as other animals. And it's just that most animals are denied those rights that causes us to refer specifically to humans too often. So I should say to people who are violating my rights, I should say to them, you are violating my animal rights, rather than saying you are violating my human rights. It's more accurate, it's more precise, and it's more to the point. Animals deserve as much moral consideration as humans. So when I say something like, you're treating me like an animal, it's actually very exclusivist and speciesist, because it's implying that animals don't need the same treatment that I need. And so, yeah, that's morally ignoble to say that. I think that being called an animal it should be regarded as much of a compliment as actually, because animals are those things which have spirituality to them, as all animals do. They have a certain spirit to them. Animals are able to live, breathe, think, suffer, and have certain specific abilities specific to their species a lot of the time. So being called an animal to me is a real compliment, and it's something that I really appreciate. When people say that you're an animal, they often say that because they think that you're wild or something, which is not exactly a non-compliment, but it's also a bit misleading. Animals do not have to be wild animals in order to be animals. They can sometimes be things that deserve moral consideration. They could be things that need shelter or food or water, all of these things. So calling me an animal is a compliment, but you need to qualify exactly what you mean by that. So calling me a man is not factually or, literally incorrect, but it is misleading because although I am a man, I'm a different kind of man to most men. Most men, I think you would see, are kind of muscular, lean, tall, and often wear a tie, that sort of thing. I don't do any of those things and identify much more with being slightly, I would say maybe slightly effeminate, I guess. I'm not too ashamed of saying that. Um, and I also identify much more with being a kid because that's how I see myself, as being a boy. If you call me a boy, I don't regard it as an insult, although many men would regard it as an insult to call him a boy. I see myself as a boy. I see myself as a kidult, and because I do a lot of the things that kids do, such as pursue happiness, um, look for interesting ways to be creative, think of myself being at school again, and I often engage with kids much more readily than most adults or most men do as well. So call me a kid, call me a boy, or whatever you like, or kidult. But calling me a man is somewhat denigrating in my belief to than calling me a kid, because I identify more as being a kid, someone who speculates a lot, like a kid. So I am also an Asian by blood. Calling me an Asian is not inaccurate also, but it depends how you look at me being an Asian. I do retain quite a few Asian values because of my parentage, such as the ability to work hard, the capacity to think, the discipline to think properly. All of these things classify me as being an Asian in certain respects. But I've lost a lot of my Asian heritage, such as the ability to speak Mandarin or Chinese or certain other things like respect for elders. I don't really have that very much. So to call me an Asian is not really accurate either. It's about, no more than 6 out of 10 to call me an Asian by blood. Now, what about the word? What about the label of Australian? This is an interesting one for me. I actually despise Australia quite a lot, but I'm also grateful for certain things that Australia has provided to me, especially in a few recent years, like the NDIS, which I did a video on, which I'll link above and below. Yes, I am Australian as a citizen and by birth, and I do I do kind of reflect a lot of the values that Australians demonstrate. I call myself Australian about maybe 7 out of 10, something like that. Because whilst I'm Australian, there's certain things that have happened to me in Australia which have been very, very cruel and oppressive. And I will link up this video called 15-year anniversary of the worst day of my life, which describes a lot of the things which have done, which have caused me to suffer a lot in my home country. So, the culture where I live is not entirely familiar to me, or familial to me either. My family's oppressive, but the police have been oppressive to me, that sort of thing. So calling me Australian straight off is a little bit, confronting because although I vote here whilst I live here and so on, and I enjoy a lot of the privileges that an Australian appreciates, there are many things that I have suffered here which do not count me as being Australian in spirit. Next we move on to virgin and incel. I'm most definitely a virgin, and I identify with that label quite readily because of my experiences of not having sex. It's as simple as that, and not having sexual intercourse. So I can attribute a lot of my experiences to, having speculation about sexual intercourse, but never actually having had it. And that counts me as a virgin and an incel as well. Incel, yeah, I'm not particularly fussed and particularly upset by being celibate. But at the same time, it's true of my identity as well. Sometimes I use it to point out the fact that I've been discriminated against in the real world, but that's all by and by. It's not hugely something that affects me hugely. So you can call me a virgin incel if you like, and I did a few videos on these labels as well, which I'll link once again. But it's not entirely my identity either. Now, finally, the concept of being an intellectual. And this is where I believe that it's most appropriate to call me an intellectual, because I think and I scientify my existence quite a lot. And that's very, very useful. That's why all of these labels come into play in the first place, or the other labels that I mentioned in this video. Being intellectual means thinking about things, means reflecting, rationalizing, and explaining things to other people. So, yeah, probably at least 8 out of 10 identify as being an intellectual. And it's a good way of thinking about me and how I established myself as being all the other labels, if at all, in this video. So I hope this video has taught you something. I'll just show you the list I've put up on Facebook at one stage, which show you how I've come across all these labels and how much I identify with each of them. This list is not entirely up to date, but it's a good indication of, how far I've come in identifying myself and addressing how I identify myself. Yeah. So thanks for watching. Hope you've learned something in this video, and bye for now.